Adela Pankhurst. Adela Constantia Mary Pankhurst Walsh, born on the 19th of June 1885 and died on the 23rd of May 1961, was a British-born suffragette who worked as a political organiser for the WSPU in Scotland. In 1914 she moved to Australia, where she continued her activism and was co-founder of both the Communist Party of Australia and the Australia First movement, together with her husband, Tom Walsh. Pankhurst was born on June 19, 1885 in Manchester, England, into a politicised family. Her father, Richard Pankhurst, was a socialist and candidate for Parliament, and her mother, Emmeline Pankhurst, and sisters, Sylvia and Christabel, were leaders of the British suffragette movement. Her mother was of Manx descent. Adela attended the all-woman Studley Horticultural College in Warwickshire, and Manchester High School for Girls. As a teenager, Adela became involved in the militant Women's Social and Political Union founded by her mother and sisters. In November 1909 she joined a protest that interrupted a talk by Winston Churchill at his constituency in Dundee. She was arrested along with Helen Archdale, Catherine Corbett, and Maud Joachim. Adela had slapped a policeman who was trying to evict her from the building. Although Adela went on hunger strike there, she was not force-fed, as prison governor and medical supervisor assessed her heart's action as violent and laboured. Eagle House near Bath in Somerset had become an important refuge for suffragettes who had been released from prison. Mary Blathwaite's parents planted trees there between April 1909 and July 1911 to commemorate the achievements of suffragettes, including Adela's mother and sister, Christabel, as well as Annie Kinney, Charlotte Despard, Millicent Fawcett, and Lady Lytton. The trees were known as Annie's Arboretum after Annie Kinney. There was also a Pankhurst pond within the grounds. Adela was invited to Eagle House in 1909 and 1910. She planted a Himalayan cedar on July 3, 1910. A plaque was made and her photograph was recorded again by Colonel Linley Blathwaite. Her mother's favorite was Christabel, and the two of them took the Women's Social and Political Union as their own organization. They fell out with many of their leading volunteers and supporters, and this included Sylvia Pankhurst and Adela. Both of the latter believed in socialism, whereas Emmeline and Christabel were pushing for the vote for middle-class women. Sylvia was ejected from the party and she set up her own splinter group in East London. Christabel is reported to have said to Sylvia, "I would not care if you were multiplied by 100, but one of Adela is too many." Adela was given £20, a ticket to Australia, and a letter introducing her to Vida Goldstein. Adela was among the first group of suffragettes to go on hunger strike when in prison. She was being targeted by the police, as a high-profile activist. Adela Pankhurst had been given a hunger strike medal for valor by WSPU. Adela immigrated to Australia in 1914 following estrangement from her family and frequent incarceration. Adela's experience of activism enabled her to be recruited during World War I as an organiser for the Women's Peace Army in Melbourne by Vida Goldstein. Pankhurst wrote a book called Put Up the Sword, penned a number of anti-war pamphlets, and addressed public meetings, speaking against war and conscription. In 1915, with Cecilia John from the Women's Peace Army, she toured Australia, establishing branches of the Women's Peace Army. In 1916 she travelled through New Zealand addressing large crowds, and again toured New South Wales and Queensland arguing the importance of feminist opposition to militarism. In August 1917, Pankhurst was arrested during a march against rising food prices in Melbourne, which had been part of a series of sometimes violent demonstrations, unusual for the time in that they were spearheaded by women. British suffragette Louisa Cullen, also now in Melbourne, was among the 5,000 plus who signed a petition to the Australian Prime Minister for her release. In September 1917, she married Tom Walsh of the Federated Seamen's Union of Australasia, with whom she had a son and 5 daughters. In 1920, Pankhurst became a founding member of the Communist Party of Australia, from which she was later expelled. She became disillusioned with communism and founded the anti-communist Australian Women's Guild of Empire in 1927. In 1941, Pankhurst became one of the founding members of the far-right nationalistic Australia First movement. She visited Japan in 1939, and was arrested and interned in March 1942 for her advocacy of peace with Japan. She was released in October. Tom Walsh died in 1943. Afterwards, Pankhurst withdrew from public life. In 1960, she converted to Roman Catholicism. She died on May 23, 1961, and was buried according to Catholic rites. Thanks for watching HerStory channel. Don't forget to like the video, and subscribe our channel.